Welcome to Tech Intersect. I'm your host, Tanya Evans, and my life and work exist at the heart of law, business, and technology. Yeah, I've earned a few fancy titles and degrees over the years, but the bottom line is I'm a writer, speaker, teacher, and lifelong learner, and I'm really excited that you've joined me on this journey. So what is Tech Intersect? Well, it's authentic, empowering conversations with really interesting guests who demystify complex topics to prepare you for the future, because your future is now. And it exists where law, business, and tech intersect. Get ready to listen, learn, and leverage. Let's get started. Hello. In this episode of Tech Intersect, I welcome Steve Krause to the show. He is the VP and head of commercial legal for Dapper Labs, the creators of NBA Top Shot, Cryptokitties, and the Flow blockchain. Steve's groundbreaking work on IP licensing issues related to the non-fungible token space, or NFTs, has made him one of the foremost experts in the field. His 25 years of negotiating experience, including representing Dapper Labs in complex license agreements with major IP holders, enables Steve to speak authoritatively to both the practical but also the theoretical aspects of this exciting new technology. Now, I've devoted a number of episodes to this emerging industry involving NFTs. So if this is your first time learning about NFTs or you just want more content on the topic, definitely search through previous episodes and continue in your exploration. There's something for everyone at every level. And if you follow me on Twitter or IG or subscribe to my newsletter, you know that I share a lot of educational resources on those various outlets. I also do so on other podcasts and media outlets and conferences, and I'm always looking for new opportunities to do more of that. So if you're interested in having me on your show, visit my speakers page at gravityspeakers.com and let's make it happen. That's gravityspeakers.com. Okay, please take a moment to follow this podcast and then like, share, and comment so that others who would benefit from this content can find it. It's time to listen, learn, and leverage. Let's get started. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Steve Krause to the Tech Intersect podcast. He is VP and head of commercial legal for Dapper Labs, the creators of NBA Top Shot, Cryptokitties, and the Flow blockchain. There's some other partnerships that we'll talk about in a moment, but Steve's groundbreaking work on IP licensing issues related to those non-fungible tokens, also known as NFTs, that has made him one of the foremost experts in the field, and he continues to build his considerable expertise after 25 years of experience in licensing and commercial contracts, intellectual property, blockchain, cloud software, business advice, and counseling. And we recently served on the same American Bar Association panel to talk about the legal issues in the NFT space. We'll talk about all of that and more in a moment. But first, Steve, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I've been looking forward to this follow-up to our panel for a long time. And the more I got to know about your background and the things that you've worked on, you had me at Cryptokitties. Particularly, right? It was magic. We were meant to be together in this moment in time. Because I remember when I was doing all the research for the law review article I mentioned to you when we first began speaking, Cryptokitties, cryptography, and copyright. And it was in 2018 that I really took the deep dive on that particular topic. Law professors didn't want to have anything to do with me. I was on all the major stages talking about it because I was one of the few people writing about it at such an in-depth level. But to be able to speak with you, because I remember a section of that paper in particular dealt with really interesting licensing issues and how to leverage this type of creativity in a generative sense, in a collectible sense. And I always saw it as the precursor for something bigger, as big as it is. It was really testing the technology and all that could be in the space. And so to be able to hear from you what the thought process was in the beginning will be really interesting. I think as a precursor to that, Tell everybody about your origin story, how you found your way to working on legal issues in this wild, wonderful world of digital, cryptographically secured assets. And we'll talk about what that means in a moment.
Exactly. Well, first I was bitten by a radioactive spider.
Okay.
And I suppose.
As we all were.
That would be right.
Amazing.
It would be a good origin. No, mine is much more mundane, I expect. I came out of law school, honestly, not knowing really what I wanted to do, and I wasn't even sure I really wanted to be a lawyer. I went to law school because I enjoyed learning how to think, and law school teaches that very well. And so I came out of law school with, I believe, somewhere around the range of $150,000 in student loans, and no clear sense of where I wanted to be. I started off at a medium-sized healthcare practice in Los Angeles, doing primarily litigation work. I didn't enjoy it very much. I was representing folks that I didn't feel like I should be representing, honestly. Right. And it made me less interested in the job. And this was back in 1997, way back when. I became close with a fellow at the law firm by the name of Ira. Ira was the second African-American man to graduate from the University of Virginia Law School. And he was coming in on the tail end now of his career. And he was working at the time on what back then was called computer law. And what we all now associate as technology transactions or licensing or basically contract negotiation involving intellectual property. And he took me under his wing. And for the next couple of years, we worked together exclusively on all those deals. And through him and through his tutelage, I learned that I loved this area of work. And so I eventually then left the small firm and moved up to Northern California to my back to my childhood home, and joined Fenwick & West, which is an intellectual property-based practice, and into their licensing group, and was there for quite some time, and then eventually went out on my own and started my own practice. Represented a bunch of small to middle size companies. Some of them would get bought. I wound up working then for large companies like representing Cisco and Lockheed Martin. And then eventually joined GitHub as their second lawyer in 2013. Wow. I came in as their head of commercial. They had 5 salespeople at the time. And by the time I left, I was supporting 65 salespeople worldwide, with annual revenue of around $100 million, and then went to Cloudflare as their third lawyer and did the same thing. In 2015, I went back out on my own, and I was introduced at that time, and I apologize for the lead-in, but it really does matter. It's like I was introduced at that time by a buddy of mine from GitHub. He said, "You really should check out these set of terms and conditions." I said, "No, nobody ever calls me and says that I really should look at a set of terms and conditions." And so I go and I look at them, and they're from a company called ZenHub. And what ZenHub had done was they had lifted the terms and conditions I had written for GitHub, including the jokes, and ported it directly into their website. Wow. That was how I met the CEO of Axiom Zen, which was a little venture studio startup in Vancouver, one of whose companies was ZenHub. The CEO's name was Roham Garagozlu, and we chatted and we hit it off, and I went up to visit him in his offices. There were, I think, 15 people there at a basement office in downtown Vancouver, and I signed on. I loved what they were doing. It was really interesting. Nothing to do with NFTs or crypto or blockchain at the time, but they were just really interesting people. And so I signed on as an advisor with them and began doing basically all of their legal work. 3 years later, you fast forward to 2018, right? And I get a call from a couple of the Axiom Zen folks saying, "We want to put cats on the blockchain." Of course, as one does. I said, "Great. What's a blockchain?" And they explained it to me, and I said, "Okay, can you dumb it down a shade?" Right. And they explained it to me again. And then I was like, okay, I think I can understand all this. And so we worked together over the course of the next few months to build Cryptokitties and to get a clear sense of exactly what this thing was going to be. And none of us ever expected it would become what it has. Right. This was an experiment. but it involves some really fascinating thought experiments, as that you sort of alluded to, right? And since then, I mean, I don't know how detailed you want me to get, but basically since then, things have been just an incredible run, right? Since Cryptokitties went viral, Axiom then took funding, spun out their blockchain business into what is now called Dapper Labs. They broke the Ethereum blockchain with Cryptokitties because it was so popular. And so they discovered, not only did they learn a lot about how to create a really interesting NFT blockchain-based app, but they also learned that they really needed a different platform on which to run it.
Right.
And one that worked better for games and for things that were processing tens of thousands of transactions a minute or more. So I'll stop there for a minute and let you guide me. But that's basically how I wound up here. It was dumb luck, honestly, and being with some really interesting people doing some really interesting things. I'm grateful.
Really great lead in, because that tees up so many of the things that I want to touch on, including we will definitely get to flow, because I imagine all of the lessons learned in what happened in 2018 when basically Cryptokitties broke Ethereum, and we're using broke in quotations. It was so expensive and there were so many transactions going on at the same time that it ground to a halt. So we'll talk about it in that way. But, and what you've alluded to, which I think is really important, are some of the hottest trends for the use of non-fungible tokens, certainly in creativity, and people will get the energy and the spirit and the understanding of that, but even beyond, because I think we're still very much in the iterative stage when you think about other industries that might benefit from what we see going on in the creativity and collectibles space. But before we do that, we have to tell people who don't know, or more importantly, those who think they know, what are NFTs?
Well, let's see. So you've got there's the very simple explanation, which is that NFTs make the internet ownable. Then there's the more sort of in-depth explanation, which I think I can try to do fairly succinctly, but stop me if I am going down a rabbit hole that we don't want to go down.
Okay, perfect.
So you've got $1 in your wallet. That dollar is the same as any other dollar that anybody else has in their wallet. I take my dollar, I give it to you, you give me another dollar. Each of us is in exactly the same position as we were before. That makes the dollar fungible, right? A fungible thing is something that can be replaced with something that is similar to or the same, and there's no impact, right? It is the same thing. Right. You might hear this in terms of people, like, or workers being fungible. It suggests that they don't have any unique skill set that is difficult to replace. Mm-hmm. Now, so a non-fungible thing is something that is not replicable, right? You can't replace it with another thing that is just like it. What's an example of a non-fungible thing? The Mona Lisa, right? That's a good one. You can make copies of it, right? But there's only going to be one. If I have a Mona Lisa and I say, well, I'm going to give you my Manet in exchange, right? That's a trade you could make, but that is not a fungible exchange. That's an exchange of different things for a determination of value. Right. So I'll stop there for a minute. How did I do?
I love that. And I very much like the use of Manet and the Mona Lisa to show that you can have two pieces of artwork that are each unique. You can decide to exchange because you've ascribed a value that is the rough equivalent to each. Those, willing buyer and seller or exchangers, right, on both sides of that transaction. But each of those properties is still unique. And so I think that's really important for folks to hear. And obviously using the example of currency, even though each dollar technically has its own serial number, in terms of their value, they're exactly the same. It doesn't matter which one you have. And so that's a really important example as well. One thing,
and just to add to that, it's the
please.
same. I mean, the same thing with Bitcoin, right? And people think that because something is crypto, it means that it's so entirely different, right? And it's not, right? One Bitcoin is the same as any other. Bitcoins are also fungible. Right. Just because something is on a blockchain does not mean that it is an NFT.
Excellent. Excellent. I think that point needs to be made over and again. So we're going to put it on the loop at the end of this episode so that people can listen to it. It'll be my new outgoing music. It'll be a soundbite of you. I'll speak to your lawyers. The final part that before we move on is distinguishing between the token itself and the referenced asset that is connected to it, sometimes purely a digital asset, sometimes an experience, sometimes a real world asset. Can you talk us through that?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's great. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, what makes the NFT so interesting is that the NFT itself is just a digital token, a bunch of ones and zeros, right? It's a piece of code. That code only has value or gets value ascribed to it based on what it is connected with. Or in parlance, I think the word is hashed, right? What is it hashed to? And imagine a world in which you have this one thing and then you connect it so inextricably with this other thing that the two are now, are so connected that they cannot be pulled apart.
Right.
That's what happens with an NFT. So the NFT is a token. It's the code. And then the token gets connected to or hashed with something else. It could be a piece of art. It could be a piece of music. It could be the title for a real estate transaction. It could be tickets to a baseball game. Could be anything.
Right.
It's just, this is the way, this code is how the computerized world will understand this, whatever the thing is, whatever the thing that it's connected to is referred to. And I didn't explain that very well, but it's like, so you've got these tickets, you have the right to go to a baseball game. How does that right to go to a baseball game get translated into the digital world? Well, if you're talking about blockchain world, it gets attached or hashed with an NFT, with a token. And that token then sits on the blockchain and is a way of sort of inextricably connecting those two things.
Right. That's an interesting, maybe it's already being used, because I know that you're working with, Dapper Labs is working with a number of professional sports associations. Do we see a time where the ticket masters of the world will leverage this technology to cut down on scalping and counterfeit tickets and the like?
I can't speak for them directly, but what I can say is that I know that they're working, I imagine they're working on similar stuff.
Right.
It would make sense.
Right. Absolutely. Think, listeners, of any industry where it is critical to know the authenticity of a thing and the ways in which a distributed and immutable record of that transaction and the representation of ownership, or the due holder, I should say, of that particular asset or experience. That's a really, really powerful use of this technology. So time will tell. I think of it as a future trend. It's not currently a hot trend as far as I know, but I'm absolutely sure that is being worked on as we speak.
You love listening to podcasts, but have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Maybe you want to build a brand, grow your business, or are looking for an excuse to talk about your favorite hobby. Whatever your reason for making a podcast, Buzzsprout is the place to start. Since 2009, Buzzsprout has helped over 300,000 people launch their own podcasts. Buzzsprout walks you step by step through the whole process and will give you powerful tools to start, grow, and monetize your podcast. Ready to get started? Click the link in the show notes to get our free step-by-step guide to starting your podcast today.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of Tech Intersect. Our conversation will continue in a moment, but first, a word on an exciting opportunity.
There's a more cost-effective and time-efficient way to reach your leading-edge learning and earning goals, to put you ahead of the stiff competition in this fast-paced, tech-driven economy. You need skills, credentials, and a fast track to a competitive advantage. You need it now more than ever, and I can help. The Advantage Evans method puts you ahead of the curve with condensed, comprehensive online courses, curated content to leverage your current skills and expertise, live coaching, networking opportunities, and more. Upcoming courses include From Cash to Crypto to help you buy your first Bitcoin, and there are 2 ways to get your advantage. Advantage Evans Encore gives you maximum experience for your total competitive advantage and access for 1 year. It includes a live welcome and modules on terminology, buying and selling, exchanges, mining, earning crypto, trading and investing, and also several of the legal issues you need to know in order to be safe and secure as you enter this space. That includes tax compliance, how to plan for a Bitcoin estate, and securities laws to make sure you avoid any legal unforced errors. Now, Advantage Core gives you the essentials. It's a short course to give you what you want and the support you need to buy your first crypto in as little as 3 weeks, with access to the information and replays for 3 months. And if you're not quite ready for your Advantage and want a sneak peek to try before you buy, then register for a free masterclass where I share my Crypto 101 success checklist and cover current hot topics in crypto. So there truly is something for everyone, including you, to get in on the fast track and learn and earn in the digital economy. Visit AdvantageEvans.com to get started. That's AdvantageEvans.com.
And now, back to the conversation.
All right, so we have the good foundation for NFTs in order to go further. And now let's talk a bit about the legal issues that we'll talk just about kind of individual NFT creators first, because I do really want to also talk about separately these IP intensive industries like in the NBA, like the NFL, La Liga, all of the other areas. So let's set that aside for a second. In general, what are some of the biggest legal issues that NFT creators face, from minting on a particular platform to selling? I know you and I have talked about secondary market revenues as being a benefit, but there are a lot of legal issues that artists have to navigate before you even get to that. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, and please feel free to direct me and interrupt me if I'm going off track on any of this thing, or if there's a particular direction you want me to go. I mean, my sense is if the first question is about folks who've created their own content, right, whatever that content is, and that they truly own it, right? When I say own as a lawyer, what that means for the non-legal folks who are listening, ownership means the entire bundle of sticks. I can do whatever I want with this thing. Right? As opposed to I only have certain rights in it, right? Like I might with someone else's intellectual property. Mm-hmm. So if we're assuming for the moment that the person who's minting the token, the NFT, is someone they own the content, is that the assumption we're making?
Yes, and let me pause there just to say, we're focusing now, we're going to put trademark and anything else aside. We're specifically focusing on copyright because it's important. People use copyright and trademark and patent interchangeably, and that would be inappropriate. So we're focused specifically on, you mentioned this idea of the bundle, and you have this larger bundle of property, right? The right to use and enjoy and exclude others, and the right to sell. Here, now we're talking about copyright, the right to create a copy, to distribute those copies, to create adaptations of that original work, to publicly display or publicly perform. And we'll get to that a little bit later when we talk about the rights someone receives when they buy an NFT that's connected to creativity. But for that person, owns their own copyright, decides to create an NFT to represent ownership of that and then sell it downstream. What are some of the things that they need to be aware of, maybe terms and conditions or things that they're working through?
It's really how many of those rights do you want to give to the buyers? Right. And which of those rights, to what extent, do you want those rights that you're granting to the buyers to travel down through the stream? Right. So if the first person who buys it gets these rights, how about the person who buys it from them? And I know this all sounds sort of a bit, ethereal. So we could talk about it in terms of Cryptokitties, if that's of use.
Sure, please.
So Cryptokitties were, for those of you who are not familiar with Cryptokitties, basically what they did is they created a system, like a game, that took basically a genetic makeup and associated those genetics, like a digital set of genetics, with a picture of a cat. Right?
And
I can't say
sometimes they
anything
could be
better.
pink and green, but you didn't hear that
That's
from
right.
me because I don't know.
That's right.
But I literally have
Exactly.
an entire little adorable collection of pink and green Cryptokitties. Go on.
Right. And so they all had these different aspects. And one of the cool things about working in the digital world is the cats could look like anything, right? They had vampire cats, they had
Yes.
werewolf cats, they had cats that flew, they had invisible cats, which I thought was the best thing ever, right? It was just a
Amazing.
picture of a background. And all of those things are represented by the genetics of the cat, which were stored on the NFT itself, on the token. Right. And so what you could do is if you purchased one of these NFTs representing a cat and you purchased another one, or if you found somebody who had a cat themselves, an NFT themselves, you could breed them on the site and you would get an entirely new NFT. And that new NFT would be a mix of dominant and recessive genetic traits of the two cats that had been combined. And so the question we were asked to answer was, okay, we had people who were drawing these cats. What rights do we want to give to people
Right.
who bought an NFT of a particular CryptoKitty? And it could be, I mean, this is where things get a little bit sort of like Matrix-like. It's like, what rights should they have? And people would ask us all the time, well, do I really own my CryptoKitty?
Right.
And I would say to them, well, do you, let's say that you go to the store, to Toys R Us, and you buy a Finding Nemo plush toy. Do you own that?
Right.
They said, oh, yes, I do. I said, oh, okay, that's great. So what can you do with the Finding Nemo plush toy? Oh, I could, do all kinds of things with it. I can take it to, snuggle with it in bed. I can, whatever. I said, yeah, you could do all those things. But could you take a picture of Finding Nemo that was from the plush toy, put it on a T-shirt and sell it? Oh, no, I couldn't do that. Why not? Well, because someone else owns that right, right? Disney does. And so in this case, because we owned the copyright, as you say, we had the ability to actually give people the right to commercialize their purchases.
Right.
And so you could take this content that you now own and trying to bring it back to where we started. You can give buyers far greater rights than maybe the well-established IP holders would normally provide. It gives you some really interesting opportunities to modify, as you were saying, to create adaptations or derivatives of a thing, to put a bunch of different things together to create something else, sort of like a Voltron type of thing for all those who remember that from back in the 80s and 90s, or to commercialize the thing yourself and to make money on it later.
Right.
I'll stop there for a minute and see if I've gone too far afield.
If you're an engineer or a scientist, you love Formula One, you love cycling, you love learning about how new technologies are changing the world around us, then I thought you may want to listen in to my new podcast, the Neil Ashton Podcast. We talk to leading engineers and scientists from around the world, hear about their life stories, hear about new technologies, and hopefully educate you and give you a better sense of how key things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, supercomputing are changing the world around us. If that sounds like it's something you might like, you should come and have a listen.
No, I think that's great because that, first of all, it's a fantastic example. And I think it is the way to really put proverbial meat on the proverbial bones of this to have it make more sense. And that, I imagine, is why the NBA and NFL, La Liga can see this opportunity as well, which is why earlier you and I alluded to this idea that CryptoKitties was the first test of what is possible and then made the case. People made fun of it. And I, intellectually, I could understand why people couldn't understand why someone would purchase a CryptoKitty. What I saw underneath it was the potential of the technology and the use of it for collectibles, for gaming, and then beyond. And all of a sudden, what was crazy is not so crazy anymore. So talk to us about, the NBA stepped up first, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong. Tell me why they decided to take a chance on this technology and to create Top Shot, and describe for folks what that is.
Sure. Well, it's a great question. I think for those of us who are of a certain age, we will remember going to the store and buying a pack of baseball cards,
right,
or basketball cards or football cards. You never knew exactly what you were going to get in the pack, but you might get lucky. You might get something that was rare, get something from a team that you liked or a player that you liked, and you would treasure them. You would show them off to your friends. You might trade them. You might save them and sell them later, and maybe you'd get a profit. Some people do that for a living. And I'm going to jump to the end here before I come back again. Like, it would be a perfectly reasonable question to ask. Why would anybody in their right mind pay money for a piece of cardboard with a picture of Michael Jordan on it and some statistics written on the back?
Right.
That is a really good question. None of us think to ask it anymore because everybody knows, well, it's freaking trading cards. Everybody buys trading cards, right?
Right.
You get Pokemon cards, you get Magic cards, right? Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just, if you didn't have the money, or you just had lots and lots of time on your hands, why wouldn't you make your own?
Right.
Right? And the reason is because when you have something that is unique or scarce, that comes from a place that people all sort of agree communally or socially has value, that scarce item becomes a collectible, and that collectible becomes valuable.
Right.
And so that really, I think, underpins the entire question, right, of why would anybody, and in the case of NBA Top Shot, what NBA Top Shot did is we take moments, video footage of your favorite basketball games, both current and historical, and mint them, hash them with NFTs, with tokens, to create NFT collectibles, and mint them and release them in limited editions. Some are much more limited than others.
Right.
So like you would have a common run where there might be up to 20,000 of this moment floating around, or a rare run where there might be up to 2,000 of this moment in existence, or a legendary run where there might be up to 75 or 100, or a Genesis run where there's only one. Now, does that mean that you couldn't go onto the internet and find a copy of that same clip and watch it to your heart's content? Absolutely.
Right.
So why spend the money? Why buy it? Why is it interesting? It's because there is value in owning something that has, I think, this is just my opinion, that has social and communal meaning, and that is provably rare. And provably scarce. And one of the things you can do on the blockchain is you can draft up what's called the smart contract, which is basically the rules by which the NFT minting proceeds. And that smart contract can't be altered. It takes a lot of effort to alter it, and it's very difficult.
Right.
Basically, you would say, look, I'm only going to mint 500 of this Dirk Nowitzki dunk, or 25 of this Magic Johnson assist. There will be no more. And so while it's possible that you could, and those are all approved by the NBA. Right. So these are approved things. It's possible that you could go and look at it online if you want, but just the same, there's value in having a thing that is a scarce and collectible there's a word now that's escaping my mind, but it's provably yours, and it is it is provably it's authentic. It's provable authenticity. So I'll stop there for a minute. Does that direct me?
No worries. Yes, that's excellent. It makes me also think of cars as well. And, you may have a certain number of cars in the thousands, but there might be one that has special or unique features that distinguishes it from all the others. Or maybe it's 20,000 of them, but only one has this particular color. And you could have any car. You could take a picture of the car. You could go for a ride on the car, but do you own the car? And if you don't want to own the car and have the street cred, and I love the social and community cred. And I know it's crazy, listeners, but sometimes just the subjective value that might be to a specific person. It might not be objectively reasonable to everyone, but if someone has connection to a particular thing, could be a family member, any number of characteristics that make it special in, above and beyond the fact that it's already unique. Value is subscribed, or ascribed, I should say, by how much other people might want it as well. And so when I think of some of the huge paydays for some of the creative NFTs in the independent world, and you think of the People thing and Gary Vee and all the other things, particularly when you have a legacy system helping to sell it, a legacy gatekeeper helping to sell it, that's always interesting. But I am really fascinated what private entities are doing to leverage their existing copyrights and other intellectual property to find new ways to engage with fans and to certainly monetize. So I'm fascinated by that. Evidently, NFL and La Liga are interested in that. I'm seeing some new partnerships. So I feel like they feel like it's safe to go into the water now. What's going on?
Yeah. The NBA, at least in my experience, the NBA was much more sort of willing to play in this uncertain field, and because of that, they made a really excellent initial partner. Mm-hmm. And I think now that the market has been proved out to a great extent, I think since January, the Top Shot marketplace has done $800 million in business, and it's astonishing. And this is creating, to your point, of new streams to commercialize intellectual property. This is essentially creating value from nothing.
Absolutely.
If you think about it, right? You've got the footage already existed. The games were already played, and so they're just sitting there.
Right.
But what this allows you to do, it's like, could you go to the store and buy a soccer ball signed by Messi? Sure. But how much more would you spend for one that you knew that Messi had kicked to win the World Cup? Right.
Perfect example.
Right. It's like, okay, that has value. You might not be able to explain quite why, because really it's the same ball. Right? There is no difference.
Yes.
But one matters more. And so I guess, so yes, the NFL, La Liga, and a lot of other folks as well that we're in discussions with, all see the value, not only because they're creating initial streams of revenue, but they are also, I think you alluded to this before, they are creating secondary streams of revenue.
Right.
What the blockchain allows for is totally unique in this world, right? In the world of, let's go back to the world of regular trading cards for a moment. You buy the pack of trading cards and Topps gets a cut of whatever the cost of the pack was, right? And so does the Major League Baseball. They get a cut. And then after that, if I decide I want to take my Joe DiMaggio card and sell it to you, Major League Baseball doesn't get a cut of that.
Right.
Right? Neither does Topps. But in the blockchain world, where every transaction is tracked and verified, you can write it into the smart contract that every time the moment is sold of LeBron James doing a dunk in honor of Kobe Bryant. Every time that gets sold downstream, both the NBA and the NBA Players Association get a cut. It's written into the system.
Right.
And that's pretty powerful too.
When I think about that, obviously that moves the needle over time, because we're talking micropayments in some sense, and sometimes it's macro payments, but it's on a regular basis. There's no one on a quarterly or biannual basis, or God forbid, annual basis to reconcile and settle with holdbacks for returns, and that it upends those physical industries in a way that not only reduces the investment, but in terms of creation, right? Because things already exist. Now they're just sitting on the proverbial shelves and have a new life. Not only do they have a new life and the participation in continual, perpetual revenue stream, but it also opens up access to markets in terms of having a further reach. There are people all around the world, depending upon the platform and, geofencing. That's a story for another day. But presumably, more people who ordinarily wouldn't have access to this or even know that it was going on now has the ability to have this experience and hold these tokens as well. So I think that's a really exciting thing, too, when you open up the market opportunities for people to participate in ways that they hadn't. That works for the big IP-intensive industries. That works for the individual. And pun intended, becomes, the leveling of a playing field here that creates a whole new digital economy that is unbelievably exciting. Maybe you'll talk final point, because I want to lovingly return you to your life. Evidently, you're working on some important things, so I've got to get you back there. But before I do, some of the hottest trends for NFTs, clearly in creativity, but even beyond that.
Well, gosh, you're seeing so much. I mean, this,
Right.
when you were saying at the beginning, sort of when people ask you where are we in the
Yeah.
evolution of NFTs, to shamelessly use another sports reference, I think we're in pregame.
Let's go.
We're at batting practice.
Yes.
Right. I think that what's happening now is everybody's asking, well, how do I make an NFT out of this?
Right.
It's the wrong question. The right question is, how do I create value?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same question that any new entrepreneur has to ask. Simply turning a picture of something that isn't very interesting into an NFT when you don't have a social basis or a community basis to add value, it's probably not going to do very much.
Right.
Right. So but the number of things, the types of opportunities that are there to create value for folks via the NFT route are endless.
Right.
It really is. It just depends on how creative you can be. The Kings of Leon, which is a rock band, came out with the idea of releasing their album both on a regular basis
Mm-hmm.
and as an NFT. And for those who chose to buy the NFT, which I assume cost a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
the NFT smart contract included a guarantee that you would get front row seats to their next concert when it was in your area.
Love it.
That's pretty cool.
Right.
You've got folks who are coming out with very interesting ideas about, hey, if you buy these 4 NFTs, if you buy one of each kind, I will drop you a 5th that is a combination of those 5 or of those 4 or something entirely new.
Right.
So for a creative type who wants to drum up interest and who has something that people particularly like or enjoy, that's a really fun way to get people involved. Other ways are to actually allow for physical delivery of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. An example, there was a famous artist who decided to create 100 unique paintings, put them in a vault in Switzerland, and hashed each one to a different token.
Mm.
And whoever bought the NFT would have the right either to just hold on to it. You could display the art that it was hashed with. You could sell the NFT downstream as much as you wanted and earn profits, or you could trade the NFT in. Say burn it is the term they would use. And then they would open up the vault and send you the picture that you could put up in your house. There are I could go on. There are so many interesting ways to leverage this new technology to enable creative types, especially folks who don't necessarily have access, as you were saying before,
Right.
to the existing IPs that are so cool.
Right.
It's just a matter of thinking about what's going to create value, what's going to create that shared experience that people are going to want to own a part of.
Digital ownership is so critically important. You and I have known for a long time about the value proposition for intellectual property. And now to connect that with another asset as well, that is here in the United States taxed as a capital asset, treated as property. That makes it really, really interesting. Holding property that is connected to other property, both of which can have a value, and the ability to leverage peer-to-peer technology or this decentralized world that is being created as we speak on a peer-to-peer basis or a direct B2B basis. It's really interesting to see all of the ways that value can be exchanged. And it's a whole new world. I'm glad that I met you in the midst of it. And please tell people where they can learn more about you and your work. This is the first conversation on Tech Intersect, but I know it won't be the last. So I very much enjoyed this. Let people know more about where they can learn more about you and your work.
Well, gosh, let's see. I think just probably LinkedIn is probably good. If you look up Steve Krause, I don't have my own website or anything like that, although on just as an aside, which is totally separate from all that we're discussing today, when I'm not practicing law, I am actually an award-winning singer-songwriter.
There we go.
So I am not going to tell you where to find me, but if you choose to look, you can go ahead and do that, because that's not the point of this discussion. But I can tell you that it is something that a lot of my compatriots in the music world are very, very interested in terms of the NFT space.
That's fantastic.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. I will drop a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes. And listeners, you can go out. If you can find my music and Steve's music, then maybe we'll create an NFT someday and we'll create some type of digital Easter egg hunt. find the digital egg. We'll do it. We'll do it. But there's no promises. And our lawyers aren't here, so don't hold us to it. Steve Krause, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to our next opportunity.
Thank you. Me too.
Thank you so much, Steve, for sharing such valuable information about NFT collectibles, the entire landscape today, and really a glimpse of the future. You gave really great examples to bring the world of NFTs to life in really exciting ways, and also to explore with me the really interesting and important legal issues involved with digital ownership in a Web 3.0 world. Now, before we sign off, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this episode and this podcast with your networks. Follow me on social medias and let me know what topics you'd like to hear more of and who you want to hear from. All right, that's all for this episode. Until next time, continue to shine.
Stay in touch with host Tanya Evans via your favorite social media. On Twitter at TechIntersect. And on Instagram via the handle TechIntersect. This podcast has been produced by Stephanie Renee for Soul Sanctuary Incorporated.